Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Parent Chat. This is our second in a series talking about
Parent
taming
chat
teen stress.
will be starting in just a minute.
Okay, can everyone hear me? Give me a thumbs up, Bonnie, if you can. Okay, awesome. Okay, so, and can you see the slides too? Let's make sure all the tech is working before we move forward. Okay, great. Michelle's got the thumbs up there. Thanks, Michelle, for letting me know. Okay, so we are, as I was saying, the second part of a series on teen stress, and we're going to include a few other things there. But first, let's go over what Parent Chat is. This is a great place for parents to come for information and for support. It's purely for educational purposes. We're not creating the client-therapist relationship during these talks. The web series and any services associated with the series, including but not exclusive to open office hours, social media posts, and any other form of communication are for educational purposes only. And we want to let you know, whether it's tonight or in the future, if you ever have a need for immediate support, if you or your child is in crisis, please text 741-741 for the crisis text line, or you can call the Crisis Connections at 866-4-CRISIS at any time. And please know that this is a safe space and you can be real, but we do ask that everyone be respectful and kind to each other. At Balance in Mind, we are all so excited to be part of this grassroots group founded by parents in the Lake Washington School District, empowered by the Lake Washington Schools Foundation. And you can find more information about them at lwsf.org. Balance in Mind works with community partners to raise awareness about emotional and mental health challenges facing our youth, to empower parents and to build communities where our kids grow up healthy, resilient, and equipped for life. Just so you know what's coming up in the future, on December 2nd, we're going to have a talk. Michelle's going to do this one. We're going to have a great interview between me and Michelle on fostering calm communications when the family is all home. We all know this has been a challenge to be kind of stuffed in our households for many hours at a time. And then on December 16th, we're going to talk about creating space for joy in difficult times. And I think we can all agree we are in difficult times right now. My name is Sheri Gazitt. I'll be your host for tonight. I'll be facilitating our parent chat. I'm the founder of TeenWise and MomWise. I'm a teen life coach and parent coach, and very proudly a member of Balance in Mind. And then we have tonight to give us the presentation, Michelle Brode. She is a behavioral support health specialist from Youth Eastside Services. If any of you have attended any of her talks, Michelle is an important part of the Parent Chat series and just gives us so much information and so many great takeaways. So we are so glad to have Michelle here again tonight. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here. We can go back to the previous slide for just a moment, if that's okay. Although, yeah, I'll say thank you everybody for being here tonight. I always appreciate it when parents show up to talk about challenging situations, and helping your teens tame stress is definitely challenging in the best of times, and particularly now. So first of all, I just want to thank you for all of the support that you have been offering to your children. And now I want you to take a moment to step away from the voice in your head that just said, well, I don't know if I've been doing enough, or I don't know how well I've been doing that. You have been doing what you can. And I'm grateful that you're here to get some information and some inspiration to keep doing more. If you were part of the parent chat a couple of weeks ago, or if you got to see the session on Balance in Mind's YouTube channel, you heard several points from Sheri that I just want to highlight as we step into this next part of our conversation. So Sheri talked about the definition of stress as a demand placed on the body. There are stressors that feel manageable and stressors that feel like too much. And I'll add that when it feels like too much, we can look at, do I have the option to dial down the stress? What skills can I learn to manage the stress better? Is there a way I can think about this differently that will feel less stressful? And we're talking about some of those strategies in just a few minutes. Sheri also talked about the emotional and physical signs we might see in our teens when they're experiencing stress, like irritability or feeling fragile, crying, having headaches, other illnesses, and then also healthy and unhealthy coping skills, right? It's so important that we continually help our children build those healthy coping skills and recognize the ones that might not be used in a healthy way anymore. One huge way that we can do this is through modeling. So watching what we're doing to manage our stress and seeing if that's effective and healthy modeling. And another way to discern healthy from unhealthy stress is to think about how one feels after engaging in that activity. Do you feel drained, or do you feel like embarrassed that you did that, or do you feel energized? Sheri also sent you away with a homework assignment last time, which was to start the conversation with your kids about the stressors they're experiencing. And I would be interested, if you were here, to hear in the chat about how it felt to check in with your child, or what did you learn when you did check in with your child. So I'm going to keep talking, but we'll keep an eye on the chat and see what people have to say as we go along. Let me tell you a little bit about what our plan is for this evening. We're going to talk about when to worry. We'll talk a little bit about anxiety, depression, and some of their close cousins, such as substance use, self-injury, and suicide. And we'll talk about ways that we as parents can be helpful. So we can go ahead to the next slide, Sheri. And
1 second.
yep, no worries.
Let's see. Why is it not moving forward? There we go.
Technology, that's why. So as Sheri mentioned last week, we all experience stress, right? We all experience anxiety. We all feel sad or unmotivated at times. And as parents, it feels like a really important distinction to figure out when it is that we need to worry. So I've been hearing public health officials talk recently about restrictions to manage COVID being more like a dial that turns up and down, as opposed to a light switch, which is either on or off. And I think that analogy holds true when we talk about mental health as well. So we can see here this dial on the screen, and the question becomes, how do we know when our child is moving from that excelling or thriving part of the dial to the surviving or struggling part, or perhaps even moving towards crisis? So I think the two most important factors for parents to look at is to ask, is this a change? Right? If you had a child who always really, preferred their own company and liked to live in the world of ideas and, didn't need a lot of social time to get by, and that's what they're like now, that might not necessarily be a problem. That might just be kind of their disposition. But if that's a significant change, if you used to have a child who really enjoyed socializing, whether it was with a wide group of friends or a couple of close people, then that may be something that that tips you off and lets you know that that could be a time for concern. The other question that I think is important to ask is whether what they're experiencing is impacting their ability to do what they want to do or what they need to do. I have a colleague who likes to phrase this as, does this situation impact their ability to live, laugh, and love? Right? So just is it impacting their ability to get through that day to day? So I'm not going to go through all the signs and symptoms around anxiety and depression. I really want to use these lenses of, is this a change, and is this impacting their ability to do what they need to do and what they want to do in life? After this session, you will receive an email with links to resources, and some of those links will tell you more specifically about depression and anxiety and lots of the other topics I'll be talking about tonight. So just know, if you'd like easy access to that, you'll be getting it. And if you're watching this replay on the YouTube channel, we'll have links below that can connect you to all of that. But what I just want to say in brief, even though I'm not going into the details around anxiety and depression, is that the connection between stress and anxiety and depression is significant, right? So if we see a teen with not experiencing pleasure when they used to like doing a particular activity, the stress that they're experiencing is getting in the way. Maybe it's getting in the way of them being able to get out of bed, or if you have a middle schooler with anxiety who just can't show up to online school or doesn't want to turn on their camera, if you're seeing it as a change or it's impacting their ability, then we know that it's time to be proactive about addressing the stress. So let's go
Michelle,
ahead. Yeah.
Can I ask one thing about this? You know, it's hard because right now we're going through COVID, which that was a very significant environmental change, of course. And then some of our parents have kids who've just started puberty, or they've had a big change just in social stuff. So sometimes it can be really confusing. Is this a change because it's a natural progression, or, you know, is it anxiety, stress, depression? Can you say a few words about that?
Yeah, I definitely think that you're right. And so many of these changes are so hard to tell, right? Because adolescence is a time of such massive change. But I think when you add the lens of, is this getting in their way of being able to do what they need to do? Then that tips you off to whether this might just be a typical change associated with adolescence, or a typical change associated with the environment that we're currently living in. But if, you know, they used to be able to engage with school and now they can't, or if they used to like spending time with the family and now they never come out of their rooms, like those might be signs that like the balance is off a little bit. And so I wish I could give parents like a really easy checklist of like, this is fine, this is worrisome. And it's of course much more nuanced than that. And as parents, you know your kids well. And you can also just get a felt sense of like, does it feel like they're present? Does it feel like they're connected? Is there anything that they're excited about or looking forward to, or do they express any sense of energy or interest in? Or does it just all seem to be like very weighty?
Right. That's great. I think it's really important that parents use their, what I like to refer to as the parental spidey sense. Like if you think something is up, then investigate further because you're probably right. So just go with your gut.
Yeah.
If you're not sure.
And I mean, we certainly don't want to be overbearing as parents, but I would rather err on the side of checking in and seeing how people are doing as opposed to letting something go. Because the sooner that we tap into the stress that our kids might be experiencing, the sooner we can help them develop coping skills or connect supports that can help them manage it more effectively, and the greater chance we have of lessening the impact of those stresses.
And I just want to point out, a parent is saying that when they ask, they get, I am fine, or I'm handling it. And that happens a lot. Basically, what you have to do is just let your kids know that you're there for them and they'll come to you when they need you. Like in that instance, if they say, I'm fine, I'm handling it, you can just say, well, I'm here if you need me. And that could be it for that time. But just to be there, I think is important.
I also think it's fine to share the information you know with them, right? And to say, hey, I noticed you've got 5 missing assignments in this class. You know, tell me more about what's going on. Like, do you not like the teacher? Is it, you know, hard to access the information? Like, get curious about it. Because I think it's fine to tip your cards and let them know what you know, as long as you're approaching it with that supportive stance that Sheri was just talking about.
And that's a great example because I'm getting that from a lot of parents. What do I do? My kids are missing assignments. They're like, you know, behind, and they get mad if I ask about it. I think that curiosity piece, instead of coming in like upset about missing assignments, that you're curious and how can I help you? What's going on?
I think the extent to which we can empathize with our kids, like I'm noticing that things that used to just take me a couple of hours to do for work are taking 2 or 3 times that long right now. And you know, there isn't a specific stressor that's weighing on me at the moment, but I think it's the ambient stress that we're all swimming in. And maybe just to say like, hey, I'm noticing it takes so much more brain power and so much more time for me to do the things that I used to do really quickly. And I'm wondering if that's part of what's happening for you.
That's great.
Yeah. All right. So I think we'll go on to the next slide. And I will just say, these are heavy topics. And I appreciate your willingness to be present to this information. The more we know, the better able we are to meet teens where they are and hear what their experiences are and provide them with the support that is most appropriate. So the connections between stressors and substance use are plentiful. People often turn to substances as a way to manage painful emotions. That could be anxiety, grief, overwhelm, even numbness. And we could view substance use as a coping skill, even though it's a maladaptive coping skill, right? It's something that teens may do to feel better, but it has negative consequences for their health and well-being, for the health and well-being of others around them. So again, there will be a link to more resources about what to watch for, but things like declining school engagement, unfamiliar smells, a lack of openness about where they're going or who they'll be with are some of the things that you would want to watch for. Is there anything you want to add to there, Sheri?
Yeah, we talked about this very briefly in the parent chat on substance abuse. And this whole idea of right now, I see a lot of memes come through talking about how parents need wine to get through being a parent. So we have to be mindful of the messages that we're sending to our teens of, oh, this is how I'm coping by drinking. And on the flip side of that, when we do have positive coping skills, we need to be pointing those out. Like, I'm going to go take a bath because I just really need to stress a bit, or I'm going to go have a salad because I need some energy. So that we need to watch on both ends of that, of what our coping skills are.
Absolutely. Thank you. It really speaks to that modeling that we want to be doing. So I want to talk about self-harm for a couple of minutes. This is obviously a topic that parents can really struggle with when their children are dealing with this. When we talk about self-harm, we're talking about intentionally injuring oneself by cutting or picking or burning, to name a few. Again, people who self-harm use it as a coping skill to distract themselves from emotional pain, to help themselves feel something when they're not feeling anything inside. And as upsetting as it can be to think about or even see your child harming themselves, it's important to keep your eyes out, because we know that self-harm is a sign that someone is trying to manage other painful experiences. I want to be clear that self-harm is not a suicide attempt. Many people say they use self-harm as like a pressure release to avoid taking suicidal action. So it's something that, when parents or others don't have familiarity with it, genuinely feels very, very alarming. And it's really a tip-off that there's stuff going on that we want to be able to support so that they can have coping skills that don't bring some of the negative consequences with them. I just want to say I bring up both of these topics, substance use and self-harm, to highlight that what lies beneath them are responses to stress. Those could be diagnosable mental health conditions or not. And we understandably get very concerned when we see things like that. And so just know we want to be able to turn that dial back towards the excelling and thriving part. All right. So I want to say a few things. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Sheri.
I want to say something about self-harm. If you're talking, it's a very emotional reaction for parents. So what I would say is, when you find out, if you find this out, don't immediately try to deal with it, because you need to get yourself emotionally under control. A lot of parents get really angry because it's so jarring. Some are just so emotional, so they will come in and confront their child about it in that emotional moment. So you need to kind of find your calm first, and then you can start the conversation about it. I've seen that a lot. And a lot of parents will tell me, oh my gosh, my first reaction was this, and I feel bad about it. So just take care of yourself for a moment before you deal with it.
Yeah. And that emotional response makes sense.
Yes.
And so get the support you need to be able to navigate it with your kid in a way that feels productive.
And I have a great recommendation for a book. If you do find that out, I will put it in the Facebook or something. I think it's a great book. It's always good to have resources when you find something out like this.
Absolutely. So last, I want to come to the topic of suicide, which we could spend so much more time on. And I raised this topic to say that this is clearly a significant public health issue. This is something that has touched many, many, many of our lives. When we're talking about supporting our children with difficult or painful emotions, it's important to acknowledge the elephant in the room, which is suicide. It's an extreme response that people have when facing stressors. There are two main points I want to make here. One very important step you can take today to decrease the risk of suicide in your home is to lock up any firearms and to lock up all medications. The risk of suicide is 4 to 10 times higher in homes with firearms, and even higher when those firearms are stored, loaded, or unlocked. And obviously firearms are a very lethal method of attempted suicide. I also just want to say that locking up all medication is prevention both for suicide as well as for substance abuse. Nobody ever needs access to 250 Tylenol at any given time. So I would just say, buy those little travel bottles of whatever, buy the Costco size bottle and keep that locked up, and just refill the little tiny travel bottles and only have around small non-lethal amounts of over-the-counter medications or prescription medications, and leave the rest locked up. The second thing I would say about suicide is that it's really important to know that it's important for us to talk to our kids about suicide. It's important to ask if they've had any thoughts of suicide. I know it's not easy, just like Sheri was saying around self-harm, but you want to let your child know that there's someone that they can talk to about this. And again, you'll have more guidance in some of the links that we'll share. All right. So heavy stuff. Let's take a breath in.
This
Let's
is
let
big.
that breath go. And then let's look at some of the things we can do to help.
One thing I want to say before we move on, Michelle, is there's kind of the myth out there that if you bring it up, you're going to create this thought in your child's head about suicide, and that's not true. So don't be afraid to talk about it and to ask those questions, point blank to your kids.
For sure. The cat is out of the bag. We do not live in an era where kids are not familiar with that concept.
Right.
So, okay. So what I'm going to invite you to do for the next few minutes is that as we talk through these ideas about how we can be helpful in taming teen stress, I want you to jot down some of the things that you feel like might be doable for you from the list of ideas that we talk about. And we're going to ask you in a little while about some of the ideas you have captured. So first of all, I just want to look at protective factors. This is a really helpful prevention strategy, and it's really helpful when we're in the process of helping youth deal with their stress. I want to make a point or make a note about a couple of things on the graphic that you're seeing there. So first of all, connection takes up about a half of the real estate on that slide, right? So it's connection with parents, it's connection with other supportive adults, with friends, and with mental health providers. So as parents and as adults in the community, fostering those connections goes a really, really long way. And so I really want to emphasize that as a protective factor. The other thing I want to note is that while academic achievement is a protective factor on there, expecting or demanding academic achievement from a child who is struggling would actually be a risk factor, right? So if they are the kind of kid who is in a situation where achieving academically is doable for them, that can serve as a protective factor. But demanding that in a time of stress or struggle is exactly the opposite. Anything on that, Sheri, you want to add?
Sorry, it wasn't letting me unmute. Yes, I would say this one, Michelle, is really big right now because I know that with online land, with COVID restrictions, academic achievement is more difficult for kids this year than it might normally be. And a lot of parents feel like they need to stay on top of their kids in order to keep their achievement level at the normal level. So I would say right now is a time where you can back off a little bit, make sure you're putting mental wellness and mental health first and foremost before academic achievement.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you. Okay, so our next slide is something else we can do as parents is to encourage helpful thinking. Our minds have built-in bias to notice the negative. Um, and if you've been paying attention to your own inner dialogue over the decades of your life without much conscious attention to combat it, you've probably noticed that a large percentage of our thoughts are negative. So when we notice that our child looks like the person on this slide, we can ask some questions to help nudge them towards a different point of view. And so, you know what, that slide is super small in my view right now. Sheri, are you able to read it? Or should I?
Interesting.
Yeah.
I
I
will
can pull
read
up.
it. I have
Okay.
it really big, so I'm not sure. Bonnie says she was having some issues seeing it too. Okay, so do you want me to read the questions
You know what, I actually,
on the right side for everyone?
yeah, that's fine. Although I do have it right now. Do you want me to go ahead
Okay.
with it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So just asking your kids, like, does that thought feel helpful? Like, my teacher hates me. She never gives me a break. Like, does that feel helpful? It might be true, but does thinking that thought feel helpful? What would you tell a friend who was worried about this? Sometimes playing a game of worst case scenario, like what's the worst thing that could happen? I will tell you, like working with middle schoolers in the Lake Washington School District, there have been times where a kid can get from getting a bad grade on a quiz to being homeless and living under a bridge in just a couple of steps. And it's like pretty amazing that when they get to that point of articulating that they are going to be homeless and living under a bridge, like they get to see that it's kind of a ridiculous worry, that there's such a direct line to the current stress and really big outcomes. Sometimes I'll ask, like, how would you cope with that if it did happen? What's the best thing that could happen? And what is the most likely thing to happen? So what I say when I first introduce trying to turn towards more helpful thoughts is don't practice it on anyone else till you've tried it yourself for a while, right? So like, you know, we have to challenge our own unhelpful thoughts, whether it's about our kids' grades or anything else that it's helpful to know that. All right. If you notice that they have no ability to find more helpful thoughts, that could be a tip off that it's time to seek outside support. If they really can't access that, then let's talk about some ways that you can find other people. Sheri, can we go to that slide? Fabulous. So here are some ways to do that. You can reach out to your school counselors. You can talk to your primary care provider about concerns that you're seeing or asking for referrals. Youth Eastside Services partners with the Lake Washington School District. We are in every Lake Washington middle school and high school and choice school. Crisis Connections is another resource both for parents and for teens. They have a Teen Link hotline and chat available, as well as crisis text line, which Sheri mentioned earlier. And again, we'll link these in the resources below. So the last thing I would encourage you to do is to help your child develop a plan for rough moments. And this is on the next slide. This is useful for everyone, not just if you have concerns that your child is really struggling deeply. And so let me just point out a couple of things step by step. I am not seeing the second parts of that. Sheri, if you click that, does another thing come up or not?
Let's see.
Oh,
Here we go.
yay. Okay, you can go ahead and click them
Click
all.
them all. Okay.
Wow, I do not remember putting in any animations there. Fabulous. Okay, so by the way, you can find apps that will walk you through this step by step. And for some kids, it's really, really helpful just to have this on their phone, in their hands all the time. And if you just look up safety plan in the App Store, you'll find several. So step one is just noticing like what's going on and when should I pull this plan out. Step two is thinking about what can I do on my own? Can I go for a walk or listen to music? Step three is who can I talk to or where can I go for distraction? Step four is thinking about who in my life can I turn to for help? So by the way, at step three, I'm fine with having friends or peers on that list because, you know, maybe talking to your best friend is a good distraction. When we get to step four and we're thinking about where can I go for help, we really want adults on those lists. And if kids don't have any adults they can talk to, I always encourage them to put in crisis text line or Teen Link or crisis connections because there really are resources available to them 24 hours a day. And then step 5 is thinking about what outside resources can I use. So things like, crisis connections or teammate or professionals as well. So those are the tools I want to hand you right now. Sheri, I've got some ideas for breakout rooms, but if we want to, answer any questions from the chat or talk about anything before we go into breakout rooms, happy to.
If anybody has questions, please feel free to put those in the chat box. Even if you're in the breakout rooms, you can still. One thing I want to follow up on this, Michelle, that I know you see this as well. On step 3, I see a lot of kids are really trying to be the therapist in crisis situation. They're trying to be the sole support. And part of that is when they hit middle school, especially, they want to be independent and show that they are adults and can handle these situations. So really check in with your kid, especially if you feel like they are the therapist for their group, because it can get really heavy to be the one who is trying to help their friend. I mean, sometimes if their friend is feeling suicidal, they'll reach out to a friend instead of a therapist or, somebody else, an adult. So just keep an eye on that and make sure that your child's not taking that on.
Right. Absolutely. Research shows that teens want to talk to each other first. And so part of our responsibility in terms of developing mental health literacy is to teach teens how to connect their friends to help. And so we as adults, even as mental health professionals, are not allowed to handle suicidal situations or situations where there's high risk by ourselves. It takes more than one person to do that. And so it's really important that we teach our kids how to link their friends to helpful adults.
So one thing you can do is have them put on their phone the crisis line, the Trevor Project line, to have all those resources in their phone so that they don't necessarily have to come and ask you when they need those. They've got them in hand.
Yeah, I see a question in the chat, and this relates exactly to what Sheri had just brought up about, what if your friend does become the therapist to their friends? So what I say to teens is like, if your friend came to you with a toothache, you would not practice amateur dentistry on them, right? Like, that you don't have the skills or the training or the equipment needed to be a dentist to your friend, no matter how much you love them and no matter how much pain they are in. And so I think, teens don't necessarily understand that therapists are using skills other than just like listening or commiserating in order to help clients get to a different place. But just like you don't practice amateur dentistry, you don't practice amateur psychology either. And the most helpful and the most important thing that teens can do is to help their friends connect to a supportive adult and to maintain their friendship with them.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's so important that we're steering them into the right direction there. Okay, and then someone had asked earlier about if your teen or your child is suffering from severe anxiety, how did you handle this in the new environment of e-learning and online learning?
Yeah, so hard. I mean, even in less complex, less unusual times, helping a child navigate anxiety is really it weighs heavily on a parent. And so I would just say, if anxiety is really getting in the way of your child being able to do what they need to do each day, being able to enjoy their days, then it's really important that you reach out for professional help. There are so many effective treatments for anxiety and for depression that to be loving and kind and hope that it gets better just does our children a disservice. Like, it's really, really helpful to connect to professionals who know how to navigate those circumstances.
And just like we're talking about, the teens aren't the therapists, we as parents can't be expected to step in and deal with it all. Even a mental health professional who has a child dealing with it will probably reach out for a therapist to
No
help you.
teenager wants their parent to be their mental health professional.
Right.
As a mental health professional, I can tell you that. So yeah, I mean, and that's part of building that web of adults who are there for your kids.
Mm-hmm. So important. So I think we're ready for the breakout sessions. We wanted to ask if there's anybody who needs a translator. We have later tonight, then let us know and we can put you into that breakout. You can let us know privately or to everyone, either way, and we'll make that happen. So Michelle, what do you have for us for our first breakout room?
Yes. Okay. So what I have for our first breakout room is to talk about one step you can imagine yourself taking this week to better support your child in managing their stress. So we've talked about several things: discerning healthy and unhealthy coping skills, increasing your connection with your child, facilitating their connection with others, locking up firearms and medications, encouraging more helpful thinking, reaching out for help, and planning for rough moments. So you might have heard other things or might have had other ideas sparked by those. But in our breakout rooms, I'd love to spend a few minutes just talking about what's one thing you can do this week to better support your child.
Hello, hello. Let's see. For some reason, it completely changed my whole layout here. Okay, so interesting conversations. In our group, we talked about, this is super important, I think, Michelle, you'd agree, that we don't want to lead with these difficult questions. We don't want to just jump in and say, hey, have you had thoughts of hurting yourself? Because our kids are going to run the other way. So we want to make sure that it's part of a bigger, probably more casual conversation, and then we can have that just as part of it. Bonnie, do we have everyone back in here? It's like my whole thing changed, so I can't tell if anybody's still in breakout rooms.
No, there shouldn't be anybody still in breakout rooms.
Okay, great. Okay, so we are now going to go to breakout room number 2. So Michelle, if you want to tell us what we're going to be talking about. Is Michelle here?
I am here. Sorry, I was muted and I couldn't get unmuted, and you know the deal. Okay, so the second question kind of has to do with the idea that we were looking at with those protective factors of, how important it is to have lots of supportive connections within a community. And so my second question, my question for breakout room 2 is, how can you be there for kids other than your own children? Or how can you be there for parents who you know are having a really hard time right now? So part of being that wider village for other people, I think it is so easy to, when we're feeling challenged, like our focus gets very narrow, right? And now that we're all in our own homes with our own families, not out in the world as much, there are so many things that make it easy to fall into that narrow focus. And I think it's helpful and it's healthy for us to think about, how can I be there for kids other than my own? And how can I be there for parents outside my household as well?
Hello, everyone. It's great to see some faces on the screen. Hello, hello. All right, Michelle, you want to take it from here?
Sure. I guess I can do that. Yeah. Tell me what time we're at. I'm in a view where I can't see.
It is 8:25, so we have 5 minutes to wrap it up.
Okay.
Was there anything in the breakout room that you were in that kind of made you think, oh, we should talk about this as a big group?
Yeah. Well, there were definitely, people have had some really lovely ideas about how to be there for other people. One of our group members bakes pies and delivers them to other people. Somebody else talked about connecting with friends and going for a walk, or even just FaceTiming, acknowledging that things just feel really hard right now, and maybe reaching out to somebody and, not necessarily expecting that they're gonna, bare their soul, but just to let them know, like, I know things are hard for everybody right now. And I just wanted you to know that I'm thinking about you and I care about you. can be super helpful. There was some questions around like, how do we share our struggles when they involve our kids? Because we start to feel like maybe we're infringing on their privacy. And that's something that's really challenging to navigate. And so again, it's not one of those things I have a super easy answer for, but I would just say that, finding somebody that you trust, that you know will keep confidences. I can tell you, my friends who live out of town and who have kids older than mine are my go-to people for that, because they have a sense of perspective on how things like that can play out over time. And I also just know that they don't run in the same world that my kid runs in. And so it's not like there's necessarily the same level of privacy that is being violated by that. So that's kind of how I navigate it. But I appreciate the respect for your children that is present in that question. And I also want you to have the outlets to talk to people. And if that does mean finding a therapist or a parent coach for yourself, then I highly encourage you to invest in your well-being that way.
And also finding groups that you can be a part of can help too. I know a lot of people lean on their friends, but it is good to have even like a different perspective from your friends. Sometimes that's purely like venting, and sometimes you need a little more support than that. So, and there is that fine line of sharing personal information. It's not like when you were talking about nap time and breastfeeding and, bath time. These are big issues that come up. So it is important to be mindful of your kids and their privacy, for sure. So speaking of groups, there are groups at YES, right, Michelle?
There are groups for youth at the moment. I don't know if we have any parent groups running right now. There are times where we have had parent groups for parents of teens who are in treatment with us for substance use concerns. That one's on pause just for a few weeks right now. We've had groups for parents of teens with anxiety and depression. But the other thing is, like, a lot of youth are in treatment with dialectical behavioral therapy, which is DBT, and a lot of DBT programs really do encourage and sometimes require a parent component, and I highly recommend those. I think those are skills that everybody can use, and so if your child is in a program, or if you're looking for a program to help kids dealing with big emotions, I think DBT and a skills group for either families or parents is really just highly valuable as well.
And there's a really great book on CBT that's created for parents. We'll see if we can put that in the follow-up email, because groups are great. And that's what I would highly recommend first and foremost. But if you can't get that done, you can't find the right one, or for whatever reason you don't want to join a group, at least you'll have a starting point to see what CBT is all about. So that's really good.
I hate to make an offering this vague, but I will. There are so many online groups right now that do not depend on your geographic location. And so if anybody in this country is hosting a group for parents of teens who are struggling, find them, right? Like, I participate in like a creativity coaching circle by somebody who's based in Toronto, and there are people literally all over the world that are on that call at the same time I am. 5:30 Monday mornings our time, by the way. That's brutal, but worth it. So, there are just so many options out there now. And so even though I don't have anything specific to recommend, I imagine somebody's doing that good work.
I will talk very briefly about my own group that I have going. It's the MomWise group, and that's for moms with girls in middle school or high school. And it's a really great group of women who are supporting each other. So you just look up momwise.club and you can get the information there. So it's time. We're ready to close up. It's 8:30. Bonnie wanted to do a quick poll before we shut everything down. You want to throw that one up, Bonnie?
Yeah, this is going to be really fast. Just 2 questions. If you could give us a little feedback, we'd really appreciate it.
Okay, great. So I just want to say thank you to everybody for taking your time to be here. Like Michelle said, I mean, it's so wonderful that you're here. You've probably been on Zoom all day, if not just, part of the day, but the fact that you're here just shows what a great parent you are, and you're willing to be open to information and support. And that's really wonderful. So I hope we will see you at future parent chats. And after you fill out this wonderful poll that Bonnie's throwing up, you're free to go. Everyone, good night, and thank you for coming.